So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has abruptly fired Army Chief of Staff General Randy George, removing the Army's top officer amid the ongoing war in Iran. A Defense Department official says George was asked to step down and to retire immediately, with former Hegseth aide Christopher Leneve expected to take over as acting Chief of Staff. The Pentagon confirmed the move online, thanking George for his decades of service but giving no explanation. Two defense officials tell the Washington Post 2 Army generals also were fired alongside George. Nominated in 2023, George was expected to serve through 2027. He's a West Point grad and has held key roles in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The decision is raising questions on Capitol Hill, even among Republicans, including Republican Congressman Rich McCormick of Georgia, calling the firing concerning. So, Tom Nichols, you're writing about this firing in a new piece for The Atlantic. You write this, quote, even in less dangerous times, the public still would have a right to answers about such an unprecedented purge of the senior U.S. military ranks. George is not the first general to get an unwanted retirement invitation from an irate civilian leader. But America is now engaged in its biggest conflict in decades, with thousands of troops headed into possible combat on the shores of a country the size of Alaska, with more than 3 times the population of North Korea, and with a president whose only formal speech on the war so far consisted of 19 minutes of jumbled thoughts. The American people deserve to know why so many of their top officers are being tossed out of their jobs. And a lot of the reporting this morning, Tom, is that George tried to stand up effectively several times to Pete Hegseth on a lot of the decisions he was making, including the refusal to promote people, mostly women, some women of color who had earned those promotions, and Pete Hegseth refusing that. Just butting heads effectively with George cost him his job.
And if it were only George, and somehow we could trace this to a discrete decision that, the opposing Hegseth, for example, on the promotion lists, or Hegseth's interference in the Army's investigation into this chowder-headed stunt with the helicopters at Kid Rock's house, or some place where they had come to a conflict, you'd say, well, sometimes it happens. A general and a SecDef just don't get along. That's not what's going on. Hegseth has been on a rolling purge of senior officers from the moment he got here, got to the Pentagon. That's really concerning, because there needs to be some guidance behind that. I do think you need to explain to the American people, look, I'm cleaning out these officers because I want officers that have more of a certain kind of skill or more of a certain kind of background. And instead, it seems like this is in particular an animus against the Army, which, Hegseth has some pretty bitter feelings about as a passed over major who later said that the Army literally, he wrote that it spit him out. And also against kind of the American high command in general. This goes back to the day when he dragged 800 generals and admirals into an auditorium and, said, new sheriff in town, everybody's got to lose weight. So I think this is a real concern about what kind of political project here is causing, or personal issue for that matter, is causing Hegseth to try to clean out these top ranks. It's really disturbing, and it's especially disturbing when we're in the middle of a war. The elements of the 82nd Airborne could be in Iran. And you just fired the Army Chief of Staff with no explanation, no accusation of wrongdoing, no accusation of incompetence or disloyalty. The American people have a right to know what the heck's going on.
Well, these political purges, there's a long history. You know it far better than I do, Tom, but these political purges of military officers for political, not military reasons, always end badly. Of course, the grand historical example is Stalin purging his ranks of generals, leading up to the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, and Stalin being completely flat-footed. But more recently, I will say, if we want to know how other people are looking at us, let's look how, I'm sure you feel the same way, how I'm looking at President Xi's gutting of his top generals and admirals in China. He's gone on a political purge for his own purposes, too. And every time I see another general with 30 years experience fired. I'm like, good, check. And he continues to do that. He continues purging his top ranks. And again, I understand China sees us as the enemy, so I see that as great news. The converse of that, well, hold on. The converse of that is true as well. When people see Pete Hegseth randomly firing generals and admirals and top-ranked officers with a cumulative, hundreds of years of experience, our enemies across the world, especially in Tehran right now, have to be delighted that he is so caught up on stupid, small, granular, made-up political issues that he's weakening the United States military and its command leadership.
Absolutely. Here we are in the middle of a war with Iran. We've gone to war against a large country. There's a giant war still going on for 4 years in the middle of Europe, and Pete Hegseth's obsessed with making the Chaplain Corps great again. It's almost like the secretary isn't capable of concentrating on anything that isn't a culture war hot button. But what I was going to say about China, Joe, at least they make an accusation. They say, well, these generals are stepping down because of corruption, because they've been, doing something against Chinese law. Same with Putin. Putin sacks a general now and then, and they say, well, he caught his hand in the cookie jar, billions of rubles gone missing. These are loyal, distinguished senior officers that Hegseth is moving out, simply because he's got a pebble in his shoe about the Army in particular, or about what he thinks is rampant DEI hiring, and which is making him intervene at the colonel and captain level in the Army and the Navy to interfere with promotions. I mean, it is really, it's petty, it's vindictive, and as you said, it's going after people with accumulated experience that goes into hundreds of years. When he pulled those 800 officers into that dog and pony show he ran some months ago, my friend Elliot Cohen made the observation that Hegseth was talking to a room that had an accumulated 25,000 years of military experience in it while he was strutting up and down the stage bloviating.
Right. Yeah, no, it's embarrassing, and it's embarrassing for the president to be standing next to him. The president, much better if he's holding a press conference or next to General Kane, or whether he's talking himself, instead of having this guy that's just childlike, that bounces around and embarrasses himself. And Willie, it's one thing for President Xi to say, well, I'm dismissing these generals because of rampant corruption. He may be able to say that. It's kind of hard for Pete Hegseth to say, I'm not promoting these qualified officers because they're black women. A little harder for him to say, so he just kills these promotions. And I wish we had a military, and I wish we had a Secretary of Defense that was focused more on qualifications than the color of somebody's skin or their gender. I mean, if he wants to do gender studies, he ought to quit and maybe go to Columbia or something like that. But we want qualified people in our ranks, and he is too obsessed with gender, with race, with diversity issues, and committing a war there when we have a very hot war going on in Iran right now.
Very woke of him to play such identity politics all the time with the Department of Defense.
What's that up?
Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. Also, by the way, the New York Times reporting this morning that General George asked for a meeting with Secretary Hegseth to talk about why he had pulled these qualified people off the promotion list. Hegseth refused to give him a meeting. So it's not a conversation he wanted to have face-to-face. He just wanted to make public pronouncements about it. Claire McCaskill, you sat on armed services. You understand how all of this works. Just your reaction, again, in the middle of a very hot war, a very complicated war, a war whose objectives aren't really clear. It's not clear how soon America might get out of that war, to what's happening inside the Department of Defense under Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, I mean, no, it was obvious when we had Americans gunned down in the streets by thugs who'd gone too far. Biondi, it was kind of obvious by her cartoon-like appearances in front of Congress and her missteps on Epstein. What's not obvious to the American people is that Hegseth is worse than both of those two because of the damage he is doing to our professional, non-political, best in the world military leadership. And it is because of his insecurity. And you would think Donald Trump would smell that insecurity coming off of him like a shirt he's worn for too many days. It is amazing to me that he doesn't see how weak this Secretary of Defense actually is. His focus on things that shouldn't matter, his willingness to just ditch really strong military leaders that have come up through the ranks based on one thing: merit, just merit. And I think the one part of this equation that we probably aren't giving enough attention to, and Tom, I hope would back me up here, is the lack of respect Hegseth has coming from the ranks of military leadership. They all know he is messing up the military. They see what he is doing to strong leaders that have great respect in the military. They see the show he is putting on with his social media performances and his photo ops and his cleaning out the press corps and wanting to make sure the photographs of him make him look good. And when you lose the respect of the people you lead, and it's the military, and we're in the middle of a war. And by the way, has Donald Trump not noticed that Hegseth helped push him into a war where he's in a boxed canyon and can't get out? You'd think Donald Trump would figure that part out. And Hegseth is on very weak terms with many Republican members of the Senate. So all of that adds up to me making a prediction that Hegseth will be next.
Well, I mean, he should be for the president's sake, just for the president's sake and the sake of the DOD, the sake of the country. It seems fairly simple. Former Senator Claire McCaskill, thank you so much. Staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols, thank you too.